Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be discussing about the next chapter from the modern India of class 8 history NCERT. So before I begin, I would like to recap what we have already covered in the first lecture. So we have seen that how NCERT discuss about the notion of the time, that how history is mostly kept under the purview of the time, and then the NCERT discusses that who creates the bifurcation between the timelines, that what do we call as modern period, what do we call as medieval, what do we call as ancient. And we also got to know in the previous lecture that how, you know only the lives of the king, the way they get married, the life they lived, only that becomes part of the history, whereas a common man's life uh, is not at all part of the history, or even if it is a part of the history, we are not able to read about it. And next we have seen that how uh, James Mill actually propounded that the British should conquer the entire part of the India, and because they think that the Indians were not civilized, so only English people can civilize the Indian people. And at the same time, talking about the uh, notion between East and West. So most of the European nation at that point of time, specifically in reference to the Britishers, they thought that it is only the Britishers who can actually put the Indians on the right track, and any development which needs to be take place in India, that can be only done with the help of the Britishers only. But that was not the case. We have seen that the situation became more grave when the Britishers started meddling with the local politics. Okay, so in continuation of that lecture, we will be today covering the second chapter titled "From Trade to Territory: The Company Establishes the Power." So the company here suggests the East India Company, which was established. Okay, so fairly and roughly, the uh, arrival of the Britishers actually revolves around the very important event which took place, that is, the death of Aurangzeb in 1707. So Aurangzeb was, one of the most important figures during the Mughal period. Okay, so basically, what happened? So understand the fact that there were two factors, or there were two things which were happening. Okay, on one way, the Aurangzeb, as a the king, he died. Okay, and at the same time, what happened, that the regional power started rising. Okay, so you can see that as powerful regional powers emerged in the various parts of India, Delhi could not longer function as a effective center. Very important point. Okay, so as soon as the regional power started rising, the Delhi, which was under the control of the Mughals, they were not able to maybe rule properly also, and they were not effective also at the center. Okay, so then NCERT talks about that by the half of the 18th century, however, a new power was emerging on the political horizon, that is British. Okay, and now it asks the question that, did you know that the British originally came as a small trading company and were reluctant to acquire their territories? Okay, so understand from the language of the NCERT here, the NCERT is addressing to the people, person, or the children who are in the 8th standard. But see, the language it is using. Okay, so the questions, the rhetorical questions which are being asked, pay attention to those questions. Okay, and those questions actually make the concept more clear. Okay, so basically it's mentioning that that the Britishers, they originally came as a small trading company, and they never wanted to acquire the territories. How then did they become to be a masters of the vast empire? So one can think that if they never wanted to acquire the territory, how come they become so solid and so evident in the British domination of the India, that they ruled us for 100 years. Okay, so next we'll see uh, East India Company comes east. Okay, so in this map, this is the map of the uh, discovery of the India. Okay, so you can see from the British island, along with the Cape of Good Hope, how they were able to reach to the India. Okay, so basically in 1600, East India Company acquired a charter from the ruler of the England, Queen Elizabeth I, granting the sole right to trade with the East. Now that is the reason it was called East India Company. Now pay attention to the name of the company, East India Company, whereas England was situated in the west, but actually uh, the company was established to do trade in the east. So that is the reason it was named as East India Company. So this meant that no other trading group in England could compete with the East India Company. So because Queen Elizabeth, and understand the fact that a queen who was a big figure in England, because England was having monarchy at that point of time. So because of that, if queen is certifying something, which means that only East India Company can go ahead and trade in the east, specifically in India. So kind of you can say that a monopoly was created in England too. Okay, so with this charter, the company could venture across oceans looking for a new land from which it could buy goods at a cheaper price. Now, this becomes one of the reasons that why Britishers actually traveled towards India. Okay, so the goods which were produced in England, they were very costly. So they really wanted to make entry into the market, which was much cheaper, and from where they can export the materials to England at a much higher price. Okay, the company did not have the fear competition from other English trading companies, because they were knowing that at their back the monarchy is there. Queen Elizabeth has already given the rights to trade in the east. Okay, so mercantile trading companies in those days made profit primarily by excluding competition, so that they could buy cheap and sell dear. Okay, so which means that, as I said, the monopoly was created, and because of that, the English East India Company, we will see in the upcoming lessons that how they made more and more profit. Okay, so the Royal Charter, however, could not prevent other European power from entering the Eastern market. So even though up to some extent, because of the Royal Charter, the companies in the England were stopped from coming to India and do the trade, but there were some other Europeans power also. For example, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French. Okay, those were also there into the picture, and we will see that how they will be arriving to the shores of India. And next, by the time the first English ships sailed down the west coast of Africa, so this is the west coast of Africa, which you can see, that is Cape of Good Hope. All right. From the western side, so this is the western part, and from here, at the southern part, you can see is the Cape of Good Hope. Okay, and from here, most of the European, like Britishers, the Portuguese, the Dutch, they were able to come to India. So the Portuguese had already established their presence in the western coast of the India and had their base in Goa. In fact, it was Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, who had discovered the sea route to India in 1498. Now, this become very, very important. Now, factual information which can be asked in the BPSC, that when did Vasco da Gama landed to the um India? So he came to India on 1498. By the early 17th century, the Dutch too were exploring the possibilities of the trade in Indian Ocean. Soon, the French trader arrived on the scene. All right. So I would like to give reasons that why the Europeans, specifically these Portuguese, these Dutch, and the French, the Britishers, they became so much interested in the East. Okay, or specifically in India. So We will explain that in the upcoming lecture also. So by the early 17th century, the Dutch too were exploring the possibilities of the trade in Indian Ocean. So the problem was that all the companies were interested in buying the same thing. Okay. So the fine qualities of the cotton and silk produced in India had a big market in Europe. Pepper, cloves, cardamom, cinnamon too were in great demand. Okay, competition amongst the European companies inevitably push up the prices. Okay, at which these goods could be purchased, and this reduce the profit that could be earned. So basically, as soon as the prices were increasing, the profits also got reduced. The only way the trading companies could flourish was by eliminating the rival competitors. So obviously, if suppose there are four players in the market, okay, and everyone will think that I'm going to outnumber the other person in the market. Okay, so that's what the concept was among the various European companies. Okay, the urge to secure market therefore led to the fierce battle between the trading companies. Through the 17th and 18th century, they regularly sank each other's ships, blockade routes, and prevented rival ships from moving with the supplies of the goods. So obviously, they wanted to attack each other, and as soon as someone was making advancement, their ships were being attacked, and lot of things were done to them. So East India Company begins trade in Bengal. How did they started trade in Bengal? The first English factory was set up in the banks of the river Hooghly in 1651. This was a base from which the company's trader known as the factors operated. The factory had a warehouse where, so now what does the factory comprises of? The factory had a warehouse where goods export was stored, and it had offices where company officials sat. So it's similar to this today office which we are able to witness. Okay. So as the trade expanded, the company persuaded the merchants and the traders to come and settle near the factory. So this is a very common phenomena. You will also understand. So whenever there is a factory which is being uh, there, or suppose if airport is coming, any infrastructural development is being made, obviously many people get employment out of it. Okay. So by 1696, it began building a fort around the settlement. 2 years later, it bribed Mughal officials into giving the company zamindari rights over three villages. Okay, so there were three villages over which they got the zamindari rights. One was Kalikata, which later grew into the city of Calcutta or Kolkata. It also persuaded the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb to issue a farman granting the company the right to trade duty free. Okay, so once this farman was granted by Aurangzeb, they rampantly use this farman, and we'll see what was the effect of the farman after that. The company tried continuously to press for more concessions and manipulate existing privileges. Aurangzeb's Farman, for instance, had granted only the company the right to trade duty free. Okay, that there will not be any duty which will be charged to them. But officials of the company who were carrying on private trade on the side were expected to pay duty. They were supposed to pay the duty, but they always refused to pay that, causing an enormous loss of revenue for Bengal. And then during those time, there was, you know, Nawab of the Bengals who actually were agitated because of that. So to name some of them was Murshid Quli Khan, and not protest. How it could happen that that the local Nawab is not going to protest against the Britishers. Okay, you can see the settlements of the Britishers around uh, the river, Hooghly River. Now the pertinent question which NCRT asked, and is that how trade led to the battles. No, understand the fact that one can also think about it, that they came to India to do the business. Okay, the company was established to do the trade, but how come trade led to the battles? We know that how many battles were fought, like for example, Battle of Buxar, Battle of Palasi, and then Carnatic Wars. So a company which was supposed to do the business, how come they got indulged into the battles? So through the early 18th century, the conflict between the company and the Nawabs of the Bengal intensified, and we have seen that why there was conflict between the Nawabs and the Britishers, especially the company. So after the death of the Aurangzeb, the Bengal Nawab asserted their power and autonomy as other regional powers were doing at that time. Okay, so basically, since Aurangzeb was a very powerful figure during the Mughal period, So as soon as remember we discussed about the rise of the regional power. So that's how the Nawabs in the Bengal, they started feeling more powerful, and because of that, they wanted to assert the same influence which the Mughals had. Okay, so Murshid Quli Khan was followed by the Alwardi Khan and then Sirajuddaula as the Nawab of the Bengal. So this is the chronology which you have to just remember, that Quli Khan came first and then Alwardi Khan came. Okay, and before Alwardi Khan, Sarfaraj Khan was also there for 1 year and he was executed by Alwardi Khan. Okay, so each one of them was a strong ruler. They refused to grant the company's concession, demanded large tribute for the company's right to trade, and denied it any right to mint coins and stopped it from extending its fortification. So basically, they were, trying to establish a fort called Fort Williams in Calcutta, and the Nawabs, they were actually against it, that because they never wanted that fortification should be happening, and that is the reason the Britishers or the British company was being stopped by the Nawabs in the fortification. So accusing the company of the deceit, they claimed that the company was depriving the Bengal government of huge amount of revenue and undermining the authority of the Nawab. So obviously the Nawab, they were also the authoritarian figure. Okay, and they thought that it is a direct attack on the sovereignty. Okay, and because of that they started questioning the British officials. Okay, so the British company, it was refusing to pay taxes, writing disrespectful letters, trying to humiliate the Nawab and his officials. The company on its part declared that the unjust demand of the local officials were ruining the trade of the company, and trade could flourish only if the duties were removed. Okay, so basically the blame game was going. So the Nawabs, they were saying that the British is meddling in the local politics, but at the same time company was also uh, hurling lots of allegations. Okay, saying that company on particular that the unjust demand of the local officials were ruining the trade of the company. It was also convinced that to expand trade, it had to enlarge its settlement, buy up villages, and rebuild it forts. Okay, so they were trying to convince that, oh, they need to do the development and they need to bring up the factories, and for that like acquisition of the land is important. And also here I would like to tell you one thing, that during those time what has happened, that UK or England has actually lost lot of territories in the Northern America. Okay, and the loss was huge. Okay, so now even if they are acquiring the land, or if they are bringing the settlement, or they are building the fort, also for that also they needed money. Okay, and in that case they saw an opportunity. They saw Bengal as an opportunity, because Bengal was rich with wealth, with all the materials which can be exported to England. So that is the reason they the Britishers became more interested into the Bengal. Okay, and the conflict led to the confrontation and finally culminated in the first famous battle of the Palasi. So let's see what happened in the Battle of Palasi. So when Alwardi Khan died in 1756, Sirajuddaula became the Nawab of the Bengal. The company was worried about his power and keen on a puppet ruler who would willingly give trade concessions and other privileges. Okay, so basically, the company wanted a puppet ruler, so who can just who was not going to stop the Britishers from doing whatever they want to do. Okay, so who became the puppet ruler then? After so an infuriated Sirajuddaula asked the company to stop meddling in the political affairs of his dominion, stop fortification, and he wanted them to pay the revenues. After negotiation failed, the Nawab marched with the 3,000 soldiers to the English factory at Qasim Bazaar, captured the company officials, locked the warehouse, disarmed all the Englishmen, and blockaded English ships. Then he marched to the Calcutta to establish control over the company's fort there. So in the because we are reading the NCERT, so not much information is given, but actually that led to the black hole tragedy. Okay, that is famously known in history as black hole tragedy, and this has been asked in the BPSC also. On hearing the news of the fall of Calcutta, company officials in Madras sent forces under the command of Robert Clive. Now comes the the man who actually changed the politics of the Bengal completely. Okay, so prior to that, I would like to also mention to you that during the Elizabethan period, what happened that the Spanish Armada was defeated by the British Army, and the British naval forces was at the top notch level. Okay, so with the help of the ships, this Robert Clive, he reached to the shores of Bengal. Okay, so prolonged negotiation with the Nawab followed. Finally, in 1757, and just to remember the dates, 100 year before, uh, when the first war of independence was fought in 1857. So in 1757, Robert Clive led the company's arms against Sirajuddaula at Palasi. One of the main reasons for the defeat of the Nawab was the forces led by the Mir Jafar, one of the Sirajuddaulla's commander. He actually never fought the battle, and the reason why he never fought the battle because Clive had managed to secure his support by promising to make him Nawab after crushing the Sirajuddaulah. So you can see that how good the Britishers, especially the Robert Clive, was uh, in meddling into the politics of the uh, West Bengal, and how he gave false promise to the Mir Jafar that he is going to become the Nawab, and now this particular person Mir Jafar, he actually was the puppet Nawab. Okay, and we'll see that he's also known as puppet Nawab because that's what the Britishers wanted Mir Jafar to do, so that he should not be meddling into the affairs of the British. Okay, so the Battle of Plassey became famous because it was first major victory the company won in India. Okay, so after the defeat of the at Plassey, Sirajuddaulah was assassinated and Mir Jafar made the Nawab. The company was still unwilling to take over the responsibility of the administration. They never wanted to, put their hands into the administration. So its prime objective, this is very important, that what was the objective of the expansion of the trade. So if this could be done without conquest through the help of the local ruler who were willing to grant privileges, then territories need not to be taken over directly. So basically they thought that if uh, I can keep some Nawab who is a puppet Nawab, and if he is doing all the administrative tasks, then why we should be involving into the local politics, and instead they wanted to focus on the expansion of the business. Soon the company discovered that this was rather difficult, for even the puppet Nawabs were not always helpful as the company wanted them to be. So basically this chap Amir Jafar actually became wary of the Britishers because they were asking to do several sort of things, and even this Mir Jafar was feeling that there is no autonomy left for him. So that is the reason with time he also started agitating against the British company. Also, a very important reason is being given that why this Mir Jafar actually became anti of the Britishers, because after all they had to maintain a basic appearance of the dignity and sovereignty if they wanted respect from their subjects. So basically, imagine if the Nawab of the Bengal was ruling over his subjects, and if the Britishers are not giving respect to the Nawab, then even the subjects will not be respecting the Nawab. So that is the reason they started becoming conscious of their own position. Okay, so what could the company do? Now the next question was what company can do. So when Mir Jafar protested, the company disposed him and installed Mir Qasim in his place. So when Mir Qasim complained, he in turn was defeated in battle fought at Buxar in 1764, driven out of Bengal, and Mir Jafar was reinstalled. The Nawab had to pay rupees 50,000 every month, but the company wanted more money to finance its war. So there were a lot of war efforts which was going on. So it wanted more territories and more revenues. By the time Mir Jafar died in 1765, the mode of the company had changed. Having failed to work with a puppet Nawab, Clive declared, "We must indeed become Nawab ourselves." Okay, so finally, uh, what happened that Clive thought that now enough is enough. Now I'm not going to sit idle or sit at the mercy of the Nawabs of the Bengal, we would become the Nawabs. Okay, and we'll see how they became the Nawabs. So finally, in 1765, the Mughal emperor appointed the company as Diwan of the provinces of the Bengal. The Diwani allowed the company to use a vast revenue resources of the Bengal. This solved a major problem that the company had earlier faced. From the early 18th to buy most of the goods in India with gold and silver imported from the Britain. This was because at this time Britain had no goods to sell in India. The outflow of the gold from Britain slowed after the Battle of Plassey. Okay, uh, can you imagine, or can you tell me the reason why the flow decreased from the England? Because now British has got hold over the vast resources of the Bengal. So that is the reason there was no need to import the materials from the England to India. So the outflow of the gold from Britain slowed after the Battle of Plassey and entirely stopped after the assumption of the Diwani. Now revenues from the India could finance company expenses. These revenues could be used to purchase cotton, silk textiles in India, maintain company troops, and meet the cost of building the company fort and offices at the Calcutta. Okay. Now next is company officials became Nawabs. So what does it mean to be Nawabs? It meant, of course, the company acquired more power, more authority, but it also meant something else. Each company servant began to have vision of the living like a Nawabs. After the Battle of Plassey, the actual Nawabs of the Bengal were forced to give land and vast sums of money as personal gift to the company officials. Now, the actual Nawabs of the Bengal, like Sirajuddaula, like Mir Jafar, they were at the mercy of the Britishers. So Robert Clive himself amassed a fortune in India. He had come to Madras from England in 1743 at the age of 18, and when in 1767 he left India, his Indian fortune was worth 401,102 euros. Interestingly, when he was appointed governor of the Bengal in 1764, he was asked to remove corruption in the company administration, but he was himself cross-examined in 1772 by the British Parliament, which was suspicious of his vast wealth. Although he was acquitted, he committed suicide in 1774. Okay, and then we will see then company how the company rule expanded. Okay, if we analyze the process of annexation of Indian state by East India Company from 1757 to 1857, certain key aspects emerge. For the example, the company rarely launched a direct military attack on the unknown territory. Now this becomes one of the reasons, if the question is asked in the BPSC mains, that what was some of the reasons of British success in India over the European counterparts. So you can just mention that the company rarely launched a direct military attack on the unknown territory. Instead, it used a variety of political, economic, and diplomatic methods to extend its influence before annexing an Indian kingdom. After the Battle of Buxar, we see that the company appointed residents in Indian states. They were political or commercial agent, and job was to serve and further interest of the company. Through the resident, the company official began interfering in the internal affairs of the Indian state. So I have mentioned that we have seen that how they started interfering in the politics of the Bengal. Now later on we will see that they not only started meddling in the internal politics in the Bengal, but they also started meddling in the region of the Carnatic also, in the Awadh. So we will see that how they started meddling into the politics. Sometime the company forced the state into the subsidiary alliance. Indian rulers were not allowed to have their independent armed forces. They were to be produced by the company, but had to pay for the subsidiary forces that the company was supposed to maintain for the purpose of this protection. If the Indian ruler failed to make payment, then part of their territory was taken away. For example, Richard Wellesley was the Governor General. The Nawab of Awadh was forced to give over half of his territory to the company in 1801. As he failed to pay for the subsidiary forces, Hyderabad was also forced to cede territories on the similar grounds. Okay, so next is the Tipu Sultan, the tiger of the Mysore. The company resorted to the direct military confrontation when it saw threat to its political and economic interests. This can be illustrated with the case of the southern India state of the Mysore. Mysore had grown in the strength under the leadership of the powerful ruler like Hyder Ali and his famous son Tipu Sultan. Mysore controlled the profitable trade of the Malabar coast, where the company purchased pepper, cardamom in 1870. So these were the places from where the company purchased cardamom and pepper. And because Tipu Sultan was there in the Mysore, so obviously they started having conflict with them. So Tipu Sultan stopped the export of the sandalwood, pepper, and cardamom through the ports of his kingdom and disallowed local merchants from trading with the company. He also established a close relationship with the French in India. Okay, so but the British were furious. They saw Hyder and Tipu as ambitious, arrogant, and dangerous ruler who had to be controlled and crushed. Four wars was fought with Mysore, 1767 to 1769, 1780 to 1784, 1790 to 92, and 1799. Only in the last battle of the Serinagapatnam did the company ultimately win a victory. Tipu Sultan was killed defending his capital, Serinagapatnam. Mysore was placed under the former ruling dynasty of the Vodiyas, and subsidiary alliance was imposed on the states. Okay, so we will stop here, and in the upcoming chapters we'll see war with the Maratha. So I'll have to bring the second part of this particular lecture. So if you enjoyed this lecture, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.